He said he wanted her because she absorbed all the colors and he could see the birth of flying. Inside of darkness, light was held, and he released her back into her flock of 100 crows. They returned in 1,000 years from over the snow mountain because they loved his flowers. Now he is teaching them to speak.
Good
How did I
afternoon.
come to make an image like that? Well, I have so many little shapes from when I make collage, I save everything. And then I play this game with myself to use up 3 shapes that I have made previously, plus do whatever the new image is going to be. And that's how this Chinaman came together. I didn't necessarily set out to do a Chinaman, but I picked up this piece and it had another piece. And when I cut it, it was a Chinaman. And that's how the whole thing grew. And since we were already talking about birds, then of course the Chinaman he was in one of these little buildings that they have at the mountains, the sages, where they contemplate. So that's where he was, and receiving the birds. And the flowers actually mostly is a piece of silk material. You see, I have the collage here, so I'm looking at it as I'm talking.
Where does this fall in the book? This poem is towards the beginning in the first book.
Yes.
Yes, that's in the beginning. It's like maybe the third or so. I can't remember, but it's in the first chapter.
Okay. Well, before we get into it, I would like to first of all say welcome and good afternoon. Today we are here to talk to the creators of the forthcoming book from LSR Press, Beyond Birds and Answers. I'm honored today to be speaking with poet Alice Perot and artist Vera Campion. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
A little introduction about our artists. Alice is a poet laureate whose work has been published in numerous magazines and anthologies. She's an accomplished flautist, and she shares her love of poetry and music as a teacher, inspiring and guiding children to express their creativity with words and rhythm. Her poetry is beautiful and playful, and I'm so honored to be speaking with you today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Vera is a very talented visual artist whose work is full of color and also full of play. Her art has been featured throughout the States and abroad. She uses a variety of mediums for this book, Beyond Birds and Answers, primarily collage. She has worked with poets, composers, and playwrights in creating her art. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Beyond Birds and Answers is a beautiful dialogue between poet and artist. So to begin, I would like you to speak about your history as poet and artist, and your relationship as collaborators. This is a dialogue that's so unique, the way this book was created. So I'd like you to speak about that for us. Share that process.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing a long time, since 1982, and I've been published quite a bit in magazines and on the internet. And my very first book was Thawed Stars, which is still around. I started out writing mostly solo. Now I do a lot of dialogues with other poets. And that started with Bob Hart, who the book is dedicated to. This book that we just are creating now is dedicated to this wonderful man who passed away about 4 or 5 years ago at the age of 85. And when at the time that I met him back in the 80s, I was being a dancer and he was always a poet. And we did dialogues in dance and poetry. And that's how I started doing dialogues as a dancer. And then I started doing dialogues with other poets. And I've done thousands of pages of dialogues, many of which have never seen the light of day, but they will, I'm sure, someday. But then I got back in touch with Vera, who I'd met in the 80s. And we went to the same church, and we met then, and we were both friends of Bob Hart. And suddenly we hooked up on Facebook, and we were writing each other back and forth. And Vera said, would you like to do a dialogue? Because she knew she would had dialogue with Bob. So it's kind of this wonderful thread that kind of moved from Bob all through these other people and back to Vera and myself. And as I say, how do two spirits become one? This way. So
Yeah.
she said, her first words to me were, are you in New York? Of course, I was in LA. So we started doing it on Messenger back and forth. She would send me a beautiful artwork, and I would just pop a poem back and then back and forth. That's how it works.
Wow. So just for maybe the listeners who don't really know how the process of the dialogue works, did you would write a poem, and then Vera, you would create a piece of art, and then would you be responding to that art, and then Vera, you would create the next piece of art? It just went in sequence that way?
Well, basically just one poem, one artwork, one poem, one artwork. So, but each would feed the next.
Mhm.
Like I would more or less answer Alice. Plus, I'll be influenced by anything else that was going on in my life. And then she would answer my artwork, and she would add something. Or actually, Alice is really responsible for putting this whole thing together. And the way she wrote the poems, she connected the art. I wasn't as conscious of that. Not until I looked at the whole thing, I saw how she did it. Yeah.
Alice, did you have an idea of what you wanted as kind of a story or themes before you started, or did it evolve as you started this dialogue and saw the artwork and your relationship with each other?
It definitely evolved. I mean,
Yeah.
With dialogues, they're very spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Themes can just come, they just arise, and we follow them or not. I try to make a thread through so that there is continuity. Definitely, I try to do that, and I try to return to some themes so that there is a organic whole, and it's not chaotic or dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
But you will see there are common threads. We can talk more about that, and
Yes.
go
Yeah.
on.
How would you say, what are, now that we're there, some of those common threads and distinctions between because the book is broken into 3 sections. And could you speak a little bit about those common threads and the distinctions between the 3 sections?
Well, I don't want to be doing all the talking here, Vera.
Oh, I can definitely talk about that.
Yes, please.
Yes. Well, it started with Bob Hart. We've always did 9 and 9. So I told Alice about 9 and 9, and she said, well, let's do 10 and 10. 10 pictures, 10 poems.
Okay.
So 9 and 9 means 9 poems and 9 paintings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So then after that, you can start something new. A little different. You don't have to stick to the same theme because you are now doing a new dialogue.
I see.
But basically the whole thing is live. It's like You know, if you ask me what my name is and I tell you what my name is, and I ask you what is your name, you know, it's that immediate, the responses.
Yeah,
And
it's more like improvisation because an improviser doesn't necessarily think of what he's going to do before he does it.
that's
Mhm.
very
Not, but there are common threads. I mean, they're definitely common. Uh, Basically, the supernatural is the most, predominant theme. We're looking for answers and we move beyond what is known on this earth. Um, each book does have a characteristic of its own. The first having central images of birds, especially the crow.
Mhm.
The second bringing in the goddess and the concept of evil. And the third combining life on earth with the concept of pure spirit and the following of the star, which is an image I love.
Too.
But these were not thought of ahead of time. So
Mhm.
I did not sit down and conceive of the whole idea at the beginning, nor did Vera.
Right.
And what I suggested for a reader is that he's completely open when he starts and just allow things to happen while he's reading and not be limited by some idea of what it's supposed to be so that he can then add his own images and thoughts. To me, that then the book is a success because we've added that other dimension of the reader adding his ideas and going beyond the answers and beyond whatever his ideas are now to something else
I
that never
love that.
existed before, and that's the whole point. You have to be able to travel. And as a teacher of kids to teach them poetry, I would hope that they would use those images that Vera has created and do more poems from them, and that would be an ideal.
I
actually,
think all, oh, here,
yes.
please.
No, no. I just wanted to add, you know, I have a 8-year-old friend. She's my artist friend. She paints. And so I went through the book with her. We read all the poems, we looked at all the pictures, and she loved it. 8 years old. You know, there was no, pushing it away or not being interested. No, all the way through. So that I found that promising.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that this book is very much, when you speak of the improv nature of it, also, it's very much alive. Like it's pulsing in a way. I found myself returning to it over and over again and spending time on the images and even a single line from one of your poems. And it led my thoughts to thinking just beyond, like you said. And Vera, I believe that this book is so beautiful that and it translates all ages, and it could be I want to share this with, my young nephew, and I want to share this with my best friend and my mom and my grandmother, and um, it's just beautiful to return to
that's really
and
good.
inspiring. So thank you both.
Yeah, that's a great review.
That's the best.
Go put that on the back of the next edition.
Well, no, I think that everything that you were saying, you have accomplished, and yeah, I'm so excited to get the book in hand, to have a physical copy of it. Um, can you talk a little bit, both of you? Maybe we'll start with Vera this time, about how like your lives have influenced the creation of this book. Like, I don't know, the process. Your There's so many colors in your artwork, Vera. It's so bright. Um, and Alice, like there's a rhythm to these words. I wanted to read them aloud, and I know you have a history with music and with dance. So you both could kind of talk about your passions and how they've come to play in this work.
Well, all right. Um, I actually didn't talk about myself as an artist, how I came to do art. and which was totally by accident. I had met somebody at my job who invited me to join her, art class, and I did that, and it was just one of the most exciting moments in my life because I found my purpose, what I wanted to do. It was something I did when I was a child, and then it got all squished, in where I grew up and how serious things were, etc. And when I came to this country, it all sort of like my life blossomed with this. And then later on, I just want to add also that I was kind of a serious student of art, all the from historically, all the history of art, all the great painters. I copied painters, I copied drawings. I went to the museum. I took myself to Vermont for a couple of months to paint so that I can actually paint, and all of that now is reflected in my work. Sometimes, I don't even realize it, but I have certain rhythms, certain, whatever it is, circles, ellipses, whatever the underlying geometry, it comes more or less, it became part of my work. So I feel like I'm connected to the sources of art through the ages, Anyway.
Beautiful.
And well, I met Bob at my church, and he was passing a little piece of white folded paper, like a tiny, tiny little piece, to some other lady. And I became so curious, like I had to know what it was all about. So eventually they gave me the little piece of paper and I unfolded it. It was a beautiful poem, beautiful. And then I came to my studio and I created collage. And then I did it. Then I was always also receiving those little white pieces of paper. Eventually we became friends, and Bob came over here every Sunday, and I have very fond memories. I used to cook a big meal, and I would offer seconds, and he would always say, well, call me a crocodile.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so then I took another job on the weekend, and we didn't have our Sundays anymore. And then eventually he passed. And, and although I know other poets, and I've been collaborating off and on with some wonderful poets too, I miss the intensity of the dialogue. It's a completely different creation. It stands apart from just, getting inspired by something you see and sitting down and doing it. It's live, and it's that, that life just permeates through the creations. And even with Bob, I've used so many of the collages for major paintings because of the unusualness of the creation that occurred because of the dialogue.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and then with Alice, you see, I was looking for somebody, and I recalled Alice. I don't know how come that name came to my head, but it came to my head way before I discovered her on Facebook. And then there she was, and and she said, well, sure, send me some artwork, and that's how it started. And we're still continuing with
wonderful.
Yeah.
Alice, maybe this would be a good time to read the next poem, and then you can speak to the musicality and the rhythm. And
so tall and straight, meeting the sunlight in colors we take in like whiskey, straight, no chaser. There is no escape, You announce your beauty with no apology, no safe distancy. We must breathe your air without complaint. We are not afraid of beauty. That came from the picture of tulips.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, good they
yeah.
are.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I have to clarify that sometimes it would start with a poem, and sometimes, then mostly now it's starting with the artwork that I respond to. And as far as my process, I have to say that I did start writing poetry after studying a rhythm course. I was a musician and a dancer before I was a writer. And I studied rhythm very intensively in the early 80s with a music educator in Los Angeles. And I always wanted to write. And as soon as I became proficient in rhythm, I suddenly started to write because I think all art does come from rhythm, you know, especially poetry. And so you can see there is rhythm in this work. Da 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 da. And so that's the way I hear the poem. I hear a rhythm and I hear the alliteration of the different sounds. I hear straight and I hear it just there, no escape, no straight, you know, it breathes with the poems. The sounds are the sounds of the words breathe with the poems, with the lines. So it's easy for me to write because I hear the sounds and I don't hear I don't write poetry where it rhymes at the end of each. It's become very robotic for me. I've never written that way. Maybe I did as a child. I don't remember, but usually there's a lot of internal rhyme within lines that can even come from the first stanza into the last stanza, as in escape and straight and complaint. um, and that's the way I write, and it's fairly spontaneous. It's hardly tortured. I mean, yes, when I know I'm going to be published, then I edit. We had a wonderful editor for the Elite Star Press. I really, she was marvelous and very helpful. And but I don't take editing unless I'm going to publish, because the word edit actually comes from the word to publish. So there's no point in torturing yourself over how perfect the poem is. There's no really point in torturing yourself about how perfect any poem is at any time. Needless to say, if you're going to do that, do it when you're going to be published. And that's my advice to everyone in any MFA program, which I never attended. Don't listen to 1,000 criticisms.
Yeah.
Just write, you know, especially if you haven't established your style or you haven't written thousands of pages of poems, which I have now written thousands of pages. And so I can afford it. I can afford to go, oh yeah, that's good. Tweak here, tweak there, snip there, you know. I can do that now. I don't mind.
Yeah, if you're
But
so
that
worried
is-
about editing, then it can be paralyzing for an artist. So you need to put it out there.
yeah,
Just to speak to back what you were saying about the rhythm and hearing rhythm in as you write, I feel that definitely comes through. As I was reading the poems, there was movement. There was movement in the language and in the meaning and even like within me as I was reading it. So it definitely comes through.
I'm so glad you appreciate it.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Vera, will you speak a little bit about the collage that accompanies this poem?
Yeah, sure. I have it here again. It's
Can you hold it up to the camera again so we can? Oh, yeah, lovely. Thank you.
yeah. Well, you see, this has actually been influenced a little bit by the coronavirus. It was done in April, and everything was blooming in the park, and I was sitting here trying to bloom it on my collage, you know. At the time, also my husband was ill, so I wasn't getting outside at all, and you know, Alice talks about the rhythm, you know. Well, even though this is probably one of my more static pieces, but the way it's constructed, the tulip seems like they're continually growing up. And that's because down here, you see I have this line of, it sort of just comes through. It's a bit of rice paper with some gold paint, but that makes it come down. So you have the motion, you went down, up, down, up, down. And then you also have this diagonal, and the diagonal is, there's something called the golden section, and it's coming from, I guess, from Greece, ancient Greece, how they constructed their artwork. They used certain rules. Anyway, so this diagonal is not arbitrary. It's actually placed in a certain way that's been considered pleasing since ancient times. But it also makes it kind of rise up, but these two pink ones take it back. So you have these motions up, down, across, and back. You know.
Movement.
Anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you could speak to who do you think the audience is for this, for Beyond Birds and Answers? Who's your ideal audience, or who? Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead, Alice.
Well, I would say any age. I would say from 8 to 80, and beyond, 8 to 100, because anybody who has any kind of sense of whimsy or the supernatural, or I also wanted to promote the book to the California poets in the schools. I've been connected to them for years.
Oh, that's great.
And taught for them, and if you're, you know, because the pictures can be used, the poems can be used to inspire more poems with small children. So I was happy when I saw that product that I didn't even intend to have, but I got it. It wasn't like I set out to make a book for the California poets in the schools, but now I have one for anyone teaching poetry to children, or anyone teaching art to children. They can be inspired by the poems and the artwork as well, and make better pictures and more beautiful things.
Absolutely. Vera?
All right. Well, I definitely think that anyone who loves Alice's poetry will love the book, and anyone who loves my art will love the book. But you know, I have this idea that it would be a nice book in a museum store, you know, where people come. But you know, maybe I would have to be more famous. I'm not sure, but I am planning to take the book around and see if they would be interested, because I think, you see, the pictures are accessible, you know, they are not esoteric. You don't have to know a whole bunch of significance in order to understand the images. They're understandable, but they are also unusual. They're not you know, what you would normally find. So anyway, that's my kind of hope, that general public who loves art will love the book from any age, like Alice said, 8 to 80.
I am in complete agreement. I think it's definitely 8 to 80. I love that, and beyond.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And if it's, I think it will inspire dialogue in its readers, to both the art and the poetry. So I love that what you have created together will then ideally spread out into
Right.
the world.
Yeah, yeah,
Fun.
it definitely has that purpose.
Absolutely. So you spoke a little bit, Vera, about the construction and the materials that you use, but maybe you could elaborate that a little bit more. I love this game that you play where you use what you have in addition to creating new, you know, material. So,
Yeah. Well, actually I save like when I discard a watercolor, I save it. When I am not happy with a drawing, I save it. Etching, I used to do a bunch of etching. So, the first proofs, I save it. And also, if I happen to come across some silk, I save it too. I have it. This is from a silk shawl.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes. And by the way, here is a piece of water.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. What else? And everything else is a acrylic painted paper that I paint myself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And when I do my other painting, canvas painting, when I come to the end of the session, I usually mix up all the paints that are left over and create a paper for collages. So sometimes I have these unusual shades. This one doesn't show it as much, but some other ones, I suppose the grays, you see, because usually when you mix all kinds of colors together, you get grays. So you have one type, I don't know if it shows, one type of gray, another
Oh,
type,
yes.
another type of gray,
I was curious about that because there were just so many different colors.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, where did all of these colors come from? Is it pieces of paper? But it's fascinating that you take your paints and then you create new
Yes,
hues.
yeah.
It's wonderful. Alice,
Yeah.
we spoke briefly about some of the themes that were rising up in the book, like such as birds and crows, flowers, stars in the ocean. Could you elaborate on those a little bit?
Did evolve organically out of the paintings, and sometimes I would just see a tiny little star or a tiny little thing in the painting, and I would make a poem out of that. Or I would see, like in the tulip poem, the obvious image. You could not escape that image.
Mhm.
Right there in your face, straight,
Yeah.
no chaser. Um, but nothing was decided ahead of time. And I would say that a lot of these images have been part of my poetry for a long time. And that's why it came so naturally to me. It came out of the world that I live in, a world that is slightly askew.
Mhm.
It is not necessarily the world that you see when you walk into the bank and you deposit your check.
Yeah.
It's the world you see when you suddenly see a beautiful field, um, a gorgeous field of flowers, or something that isn't there um, in the ordinary. Of course, a field of flowers is ordinary in the country, but if you live in an urban setting, as Vera does, she manages to create these things out of nothing because that's not the universe that she may be seeing right then.
Mhm.
And I think that taking us out of the material world and into the spiritual is a common uh, thing we have between us that we want to share, that we want others to have.
Yeah.
There's more to life than just our bodies and the immediate things that we see or experience. Um, so that's a common purpose. And if anything, I thank Elisa Press for embracing our vision and seeing it so fast. It was amazing how fast they saw that and snatched that up and wanted to make it out there for other people to experience. So I'm very grateful. It's not every day that one's artistry is immediately seen or understood.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you. Thank you both for creating this. And
Well,
I think that some of the, both in the words and in the images, there's there are images and ideas that we can all access, but they're made somehow extraordinary in being put together the way they are. And that whimsy is there and the magical is there for sure. Absolutely.
and Alice spoke so beautifully, and yeah, it's sometimes it's just a little bit. I know in that poem she said cloudless sky, and that was what triggered this cloudless sky. You see, there's not a cloud here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be just one little thing, and that sort of, it's like a spark
Mhm.
for the creation.
Absolutely. And it's been a rough year for a lot of people. And this book, I think, is a beautiful gift to give the world during that time. So thank you.
yeah, that was what I was going to say. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say that at this time, especially, we need to escape into another world, and art can do that for us.
And
Um,
show us the beauty that's still
yeah,
there.
it, we need to find out that life is bigger than just somebody standing on a line with a mask over their face.
Yeah.
And there's another universe that you can escape to, which is a more beautiful and forgiving and loving, or even magical or mythical. I mean,
Yeah.
not everything in this book is loving. Some of it is, there's some evil in there too. In the second book,
Well, with,
chapter, not everything is all sweetness and light
Mhm.
in the book. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea either. But
There's
that was,
balance in the world and there's balance in your book as well.
thank you.
And I think also we're so distanced in this time of COVID and apart, separated from each other. What's beautiful is that you worked together and you were able to create this together across a distance. And so we can
Yeah,
still come
that's the
together.
beauty of the internet, and I can thank my son for that. Yeah, the internet has made it much easier for me to dialogue, although all of the dialogue that I did with Bob Hart, all 700 pages or whatever it was done with regular old, and he would handwrite. He had beautiful handwriting, printing. He would
Mhm.
handwrite and send everything by mail, and I would
Oh,
type
wow.
and send back. So we
I
did
love
do
that.
that. Yeah. But now everything I do is on the internet, back and forth. And I have about 6 dialogues going right now, including continuing with Vera.
I love that you guys are still working together. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're going to be on book 5 pretty soon, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, before we conclude with a final poem, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking with us today, and it's been an honor. At the book launch, there will be a virtual book launch for Beyond Birds and Answers, and I believe that that is on June 26th. Yes,
Mhm.
June 26th at 2 p.m. Pacific time and 5 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us then to celebrate the launch of this wonderful work of art.
All right. Well, I just wanted to add my own thanks to Elisa Press and Stephanie, who did such a great job putting the book together. Anyway, it was the whole thing came as a total surprise and was so you know like made me feel good as an artist.
Yeah, it was a total surprise. It was one of those things that happened. Beautiful,
Wow.
spontaneous. Mhm.
Well, trust me, as a reader, you have shared that goodness and you will share that goodness with others. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to?
Please.
All right. So this was in where there was a lot of action happening in chapter 3, and um, the character had, well, the character who was saying he was he, and we had an I in there. So you'll see as you go along what this is, a lot of adventure. It was difficult. I could not see him. He was not himself. He had become either the sea or his hat. The day was full of mountains. The sea was held up by the stars. I was dizzy with moon thoughts, or was that the sun? I thought of bailing my small craft, but better to sink and find him in the weeds with the mermaids. I did not know the name of the beast who rescued me from the deep. His hairy face held secrets like those of mermaids wrapped in slimy fronds. I floated out and up, my craft only now the buoyant energy of my storied thoughts.
Thank you.
Wow, now I think I have the wrong image with this poem because I prepared this image, but then when that's not the poem that Alice read. So I think it was this one.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes, that was actually two poems that got combined for that one image.
I
You
love
are
that.
right. Yes, that's true. Anyway, I can say a little bit more about how this is constructed. It was done, well, July. Okay, so that my birthday is actually in June this month, and my son bought me Indian handmade Indian paper, like little thing. Okay, so then I went heavy on that, you see. And here you have, this is from cut out from that. This is cut out from that.
Mhm.
This, also this, the gold, this, and also this, which looks a little bit like sand, but it's one of those ready-made papers. And I put a little piece of watercolor in here. And I was still working on the little discarded things. And one time I made a long time collage of corals. So there's a little bit of coral in there from the past that was left over. And his head that was another little piece that I actually pulled out of my pile of shapes. And I said, that looks like a face. And that's how this thing started, you see. But it's a etching.
Oh, it's great. And your eye wants to move and keeps moving throughout.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
yeah. Again, I mean, it's one of the things that I take pride in, that I have the motion
Mhm.
in the works. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely there. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.